Welcome back, everyone. If you love explosive stories about past regrets, hidden secrets, and ultimate redemption, you are exactly where you need to be. Before we dive into this incredible journey, please subscribe to our channel, hit that like button, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Let's jump into the Billionaire's Triplet Surprise. The Billionaire's Triplet Surprise, a lesson in legacy. Sir, it is exactly 4 p.m. Javier's elite assistant announced crisply over the heavy intercom that the highly anticipated meeting with the luxury wedding planner was about to officially begin. First, Javier Mendoza aggressively checked his $50,000 gold Rolex, and then he stared intensely at the latest issue of Forbes magazine, resting proudly on his massive mahogany desk. The glossy cover featured his own arrogant, handsome face. "Tell her I will be right there in exactly 5 minutes." The massive weight of the elite event he was about to actively plan made him nervously loosen his expensive silk tie. The heavy door to his executive office suddenly burst wide open. His brand new fiancée, Valentina Costa, confidently strutted in, wearing a breathtaking designer dress that highly likely cost significantly more than the average person's annual salary. "Javier, darling, we urgently need to finalize the massive guest list. I honestly thought we completely finished that exhausting task yesterday." Javier heavily ran a hand through his perfectly styled, slightly graying hair. "We absolutely did." Valentina perched herself arrogantly on the edge of his glass desk, aggressively tapping her perfectly manicured nails against the surface. "But exactly why the hell is your pathetic ex-wife's name on it?" Javier smiled, but the highly calculated smile absolutely did not reach his cold eyes. "I desperately want her to clearly see exactly what she completely missed out on." "Darling, that is incredibly deliciously petty." Valentina arched a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "I absolutely love it." They had brutally broken up exactly 6 agonizing years ago because she explicitly claimed he was way too incredibly obsessed with his brand new startup to ever build a genuine, loving relationship. Javier desperately wanted to aggressively show Sarah exactly how much her pathetic departure had ultimately cost her. Now that he was officially a multi-billion-dollar tech visionary and was about to highly publicly marry a stunning woman exactly 10 years younger than her, his assistant nervously buzzed the intercom again, politely informing him that the elite wedding planner was still patiently waiting. "I am coming right now." Javier confidently stood up and flawlessly straightened his bespoke suit. "Valentina, fiercely trust me. Sarah absolutely must profoundly understand that walking away was the absolute worst, most catastrophic mistake she could have ever possibly made." Valentina thought for a microsecond. "You absolutely never talk about her. Was she really that incredibly awful?" Javier's sharp jaw aggressively clenched. "She arrogantly claimed that I was completely emotionally unavailable, and that I cared significantly more about my complex computer codes than about actually building a real family. She violently walked out exactly when Vision Tech was just taking off." He let out a harsh, toxic laugh. "Well, take a good look at exactly what I miraculously achieved with my brutal hard work." "Our beautiful future, darling," Valentina purred highly seductively, aggressively kissing his cheek while enthusiastically babbling about their absolute perfect $1,000,000 wedding in exactly 3 short weeks. When they finally entered the massive meeting room, the highly stressed wedding planner was actively assembling elaborate, expensive sample centerpieces. But Javier absolutely couldn't see the massive crystal vases or the rare, exotic flowers. His brilliant mind kept violently flashing back to Sarah's devastated face on the exact day she walked out, completely stopping in the heavy doorway exactly as if she had something incredibly, massively important to desperately say. The wedding planner's frantic voice violently snapped him back to harsh reality, desperately asking him to finally confirm the elite seating arrangements. "Put Sarah Torres directly at table 8, he ordered with absolute, unbreakable firmness. Exactly where she can perfectly, clearly see absolutely everything she foolishly threw into the garbage." Valentina gently placed a manicured hand on his arm. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" "100% certain." Javier aggressively pulled out his expensive smartphone and stared deeply at Sarah's old phone number, a number he had absolutely never, ever managed to delete. "In fact, I actually think I'm going to aggressively hand-deliver this exclusive invitation to her myself. That is a pathetic, broken reaction I would absolutely love to personally witness." Valentina's loud, highly arrogant laughter completely filled the massive room. Javier stared blankly at his phone, vividly remembering Sarah's absolute final words to him. "Javier, one day you will finally, profoundly understand exactly what true life is actually about. I genuinely, truly hope it absolutely isn't way too late." He was going to aggressively show her exactly what was truly important. His massive global corporate empire, his stunningly young fiancée, and his flawlessly perfect, untouchable billionaire life. He absolutely should have known that his highly toxic, arrogant plan was going to completely, catastrophically backfire. The unexpected delivery, the highly modest, quiet suburban neighborhood looked exactly, perfectly as Javier had vividly remembered it. Sarah's incredibly simple, unassuming two-story house immediately stood out with its bright, cheerful blue door and its beautiful window boxes completely overflowing with vibrant flowers, a highly characteristic, classic Sarah touch. He smoothly killed the silent engine of his massive Tesla and sat completely frozen for a long moment. The expensive, cream-colored wedding invitation literally burning a hole directly through his suit pocket. In the small front yard, a brightly colored child's bicycle lay haphazardly on its side in the green grass. He found it highly, incredibly strange. Sarah had absolutely never explicitly stated that she desperately wanted children. The loud, familiar sound of the doorbell absolutely hadn't changed either. Javier flawlessly straightened his expensive silk tie, meticulously practiced his highly arrogant fake smile, and patiently waited. Sarah's soft voice echoed from deep inside. "I am coming." When the heavy door finally swung open, she stepped out, looking way too incredibly, naturally beautiful for it to be actually true. She currently had significantly shorter hair, but the fierce, brilliant spark in her beautiful eyes that had once made him desperately want to conquer the world for her was absolutely still there. Javier blinked rapidly in pure, unadulterated surprise. You look exactly the same, Sarah." He aggressively pulled the heavy cream-colored envelope completely out of his pocket. "Special, personal delivery." She slowly took it, looking completely, utterly stunned. "You drove all the way out here just to arrogantly hand me a—" Her voice completely broke as she rapidly read the heavy gold lettering on the invitation. "I am officially getting married in exactly 3 short weeks," he added highly arrogantly. "To Valentina Costa. You might highly likely recognize her from social media. She possesses exactly 3 million loyal followers." The exact way Sarah stared directly at him absolutely did not provide him with the massive, toxic satisfaction he had aggressively anticipated. Instead, her beautiful expression was incredibly, rigidly tight. "Massive congratulations," she stated incredibly slowly. "But exactly why on earth would you ever want to invite me? Can't a highly successful old friend? Javier, We absolutely haven't spoken a single word in exactly 6 agonizing years. Suddenly, there was a massive, loud crash from deep inside the house, immediately followed by the loud, joyous laughter of children. Sarah's head violently snapped backward. Boys! Exactly what did I strictly tell you about playing aggressively with the heavy ball inside the house? Boys. Plural. We are so incredibly sorry, Mom! Multiple distinct voices yelled back simultaneously. Javier desperately attempted to peer completely past her, but Sarah aggressively, highly protectively, shifted her body, flawlessly blocking his entire line of sight. Thank you so incredibly much for the invitation. I will deeply think about it. Who exactly were those? He asked, gesturing aggressively toward the loud noise. My children. Her rapid response was incredibly clipped. Children? Exactly how many? More than one? Sarah's fierce grip on the heavy door handle became visibly, violently tighter. It was incredibly nice to see you again, Javier. Massive congratulations on your elite engagement. Mom, Tomas aggressively stole my console controller again. A tiny, high-pitched voice yelled from deep within. That is absolutely not true, Daniel. Give it a rest. Both of you. A completely third, highly distinct voice shouted. Javier's brilliant mind completely, utterly went blank. 3 voices. 3 completely different, distinct voices of young boys. Sarah rapidly, aggressively stated, I absolutely must go. I genuinely wish you the absolute best with the massive wedding. Before he could even mentally process exactly what he had clearly heard, the heavy door was violently, firmly shut, directly in his face. 3 boys, and something highly specific about the exact way they spoke. Their names. When Javier slowly, mechanically walked back to his expensive car, he aggressively pulled out his smartphone and frantically did the brutal math. It had been exactly 6 agonizing years since they violently separated. If Sarah had been heavily pregnant when she left, no, he aggressively told himself, she would have absolutely, definitely told me. However, the massive, terrifying question aggressively haunted him as he slowly drove away. As if Sarah's deep, visible distress, while reading his arrogant invitation, absolutely wasn't enough. She had genuinely looked incredibly, deeply frightened. And Javier Mendoza had absolutely not successfully built a multi-billion-dollar tech empire completely from scratch without fiercely listening to his sharp gut instinct. Interactive question. Javier just discovered she has 3 boys. What do you think he's going to do next? Share your predictions below. The secret revealed. Mom, he is officially gone. Miguel cautiously peeked his head around the corner as Sarah leaned heavily, exhaustedly against the closed front door. She was gripping the heavy, expensive invitation so incredibly tight that the thick paper was deeply crumpled. Please go back to aggressively finishing your homework, my beautiful loves. But the 3 boys were already heavily congregating in the narrow hallway. The exact same piercing blue eyes, his exact eyes, and a massive mountain of questions. What exact kind of arrogant man was that? Tomas asked curiously. He was simply someone I used to deeply know, Sarah replied softly. Daniel, didn't you absolutely have to study for your massive math test? That was our biological father. Daniel, easily the absolute smartest of the 3, stated it exactly as a highly undeniable fact. Sarah collapsed heavily onto the bottom step of the stairs, and her 3 beautiful sons immediately sat, completely around her exactly like tiny, fierce guardian angels. 6 agonizing years of incredibly careful, meticulous planning, of beautifully building their own tiny, safe world, violently threatened by one single, highly arrogant, sudden visit. Yes, she finally whispered. That was your biological dad? Does he explicitly know that we are actively here? Miguel asked, his voice incredibly soft. Not yet. Sarah fiercely hugged them all close. But he might highly likely figure it out incredibly soon. Her phone suddenly, violently buzzed. An urgent text message from her loyal sister, Clara. "Call me back incredibly fast. Please, call me." Sarah absolutely didn't even need to call to know exactly what was actively happening. Clara worked as a highly placed PR official directly for Vision Tech. Massive corporate news always spread incredibly fast. "Boys, please go finish your homework. I urgently need to make a massive phone call." Sarah frantically called Clara from her tiny, highly organized home office, which was completely filled with messy grading papers from her 4th grade teaching job. Before Clara could even say a single word, Sarah stated, "He literally just showed up at my front door with the massive wedding invitation." "I completely know," Clara sighed heavily. "He has been aggressively bragging to absolutely everyone in the massive corporate office about his highly toxic plan to publicly humiliate you. Sarah, you urgently, desperately need to finally tell him." "I absolutely know." Sarah stared out the window, watching her 3 beautiful sons happily kicking a soccer ball in the small backyard. "It's just, Clara, they are incredibly happy. We are so incredibly happy. Javier is officially getting married to someone else. Exactly why on earth should I violently complicate things right now? Because he arrogantly, maliciously asked you to attend his massive wedding explicitly, so you would pathetically show up and be humiliated," Clara fiercely told her. "And exactly who told me to go?" Sarah Torres replied. "You have brilliantly, flawlessly raised those 3 incredible boys completely alone for 6 agonizing years, without ever giving the father a single massive reason to be angry. You work 2 grueling jobs just to give them absolutely everything. And now, he desperately wants to arrogantly show you exactly how incredibly superior he is completely without you." Sarah quietly watched Tomas fiercely help Daniel stand back up after he took a hard fall. Miguel rapidly ran over and pulled a clean Band-Aid completely out of his pocket. Exactly, flawlessly, as she had taught them. "Always be completely ready." Finally, she stated with absolute, unbreakable steel, "You are 100% right. I will absolutely not let him violently hurt them." Of course, absolutely not. However, Clara wasn't completely 100% sure. They might completely possess the fundamental right to truly know exactly who their biological father is, and he might also deeply deserve to know them. When Sarah finally hung up the phone, she saw that the boys had completely stopped playing soccer and were currently heavily huddled over her open laptop. "Mom," Miguel said, pointing directly at the screen. "Is that exactly him?" Displayed brightly on the massive screen was a highly extensive Forbes article about the absolute most highly coveted, elite billionaire bachelor in all of Silicon Valley, who was officially about to be married. When Sarah deeply looked at her 3 beautiful sons, clearly seeing their father's dark hair, his piercing eyes, and his incredibly determined, sharp jawline, she profoundly, instantly knew exactly what she absolutely had to do. "Boys, aggressively prepare your absolute best clothes. We are officially going to a massive billionaire wedding." The heavy cream-colored invitation lay completely open on her desk. Javier Mendoza and Valentina Costa would absolutely be highly honored by your elite presence. Sarah let out a tiny, highly toxic smile. They had absolutely no idea exactly what kind of massive, explosive guests were about to violently arrive, preparing for the gala. "Mom! Miguel is aggressively hogging the bathroom mirror again," Tomas yelled loudly from the hallway. Daniel was the exact one who had actually been meticulously fixing his hair for exactly 20 minutes. Sarah flawlessly juggled 3 completely identical lunchboxes while expertly navigating the massive, chaotic morning rush. "Boys, the school bus literally arrives in exactly 10 minutes. The 3 identical triplets aggressively rushed down the stairs in their crisp school uniforms, their heavy backpacks loudly bouncing directly behind them. Even though they looked completely, utterly identical, they already possessed incredibly different, highly distinct identities at exactly 10 years old. Since Miguel was exactly 4 minutes older than his brothers, he aggressively checked his own tie. "Tom, your absolutely isn't perfectly straight," he stated. "Stop aggressively acting exactly like our mom," Tomas complained, but he still begrudgingly allowed Miguel to flawlessly fix it. Daniel, easily the absolute youngest, was heavily buried completely deep in a thick book. "Did you guys actually know that when Dad officially started his massive corporate business, it was legally worth absolutely nothing?" Sarah almost violently dropped the 3 lunchboxes. "Where exactly did you read that?" "Online," Daniel stated simply, proudly holding up his sleek tablet. "Exactly like you absolutely always fiercely teach us to do. He aggressively built it entirely from absolute scratch." The 3 boys had been completely, utterly obsessed with their biological father ever since Javier had unexpectedly visited exactly 3 days prior. They were constantly, aggressively Googling him, obsessively watching his massive TED Talks, and voraciously reading absolutely everything about vision tech. "Mom," Miguel asked incredibly carefully, his eyes highly observant, "why exactly didn't you ever tell us about him?" Sarah slowly, heavily set the lunchboxes down on the counter. "It is incredibly highly difficult to simply explain, my beautiful love. We are absolutely not babies anymore," Tomas stated firmly. "Highly complex, massive things are absolutely fine for us." That specific, highly intense expression looked exactly, terrifyingly like their father's face whenever he was aggressively working on an incredibly difficult, massive coding problem. "When we were legally together, your dad was incredibly, highly focused entirely on his massive work. He brutally worked 18 agonizing hours a day, and he constantly, aggressively missed birthdays and beautiful holidays. But now he is massively, globally successful," Daniel stated. "Every single person possesses their own unique, massive idea of exactly what true success actually means," Sarah said, meticulously double-checking their heavy backpacks. "I desperately, fiercely craved a beautiful family. He aggressively wanted a massive, multi-billion-dollar company, and now he is officially getting married," Miguel stated incredibly quietly. "To someone named Valentina Costa," Tomas aggressively added. "She is a massive elite influencer," Daniel helpfully supplied, flashing his perfectly white teeth. Sarah literally could not help but laugh out loud. They had actually been aggressively stalking their father's brand new fiancée online. They all looked incredibly, pathetically guilty. "We just desperately wanted to deeply know absolutely everything about our other family," Miguel defended them. Outside, the massive yellow school bus loudly honked its heavy horn. "We will aggressively do this tonight," Sarah promised fiercely. "Tonight, we will officially talk significantly more about the massive wedding." Their identical faces instantly, miraculously lit up. "Let's go! We will definitely see!" She gave every single one of them a fierce, bone-crushing hug. "Have an absolutely incredible day at school, and do absolutely not aggressively Google things during class." Sarah slowly pulled out her smartphone and the heavily crumpled cream-colored note as she proudly watched them confidently board the massive bus. It was officially time to say yes. "Hello, Clara. It's me. I urgently need you to explicitly tell me absolutely everything you know about this massive wedding." She proudly watched her 3 boys happily sit together through the bus window. They were highly likely already aggressively making massive strategic plans about exactly what to wear, exactly what to say, and exactly how to finally, officially, meet the biological father they had been incredibly curious about for so incredibly long. Sarah flawlessly typed out her highly official, electronic RSVP response. Sarah Torres and exactly 3 additional guests will absolutely be attending. It was officially time to start the massive, explosive countdown. The ultimate wedding crash, the massive, breathtaking grand ballroom of the ultra-luxury Hotel Ritz, was completely, heavily packed with the absolute highest, most elite society in all of Madrid. Javier stood confidently in the absolute dead center of the massive room, arrogantly accepting endless, glowing compliments, while Valentina aggressively charmed the elite, billionaire investors. The highly stressed wedding planner was frantically, enthusiastically obsessing over the precise arrangement of the massive head table and the highly exclusive guest list. Javier absolutely wasn't paying a single ounce of attention. He kept aggressively, constantly glancing directly toward the massive, heavy double doors. He had arrogantly, maliciously invited Sarah to come, but she had absolutely never responded to his highly toxic provocation. "Javier, darling," Valentina purred, aggressively grabbing his arm. "The elite Rothschild family urgently wants to deeply discuss their massive corporate investment." He flawlessly plastered on his absolute best, highly fake CEO smile and confidently faced the massive investors. And that was exactly when the loud, chaotic conversations in the massive ballroom completely, violently ceased. Absolute, terrifying silence for one single, massive microsecond. Then, a massive, collective wave of loud, shocked gasps. And then, only highly toxic, frantic whispers. Javier violently spun around. Sarah was standing confidently right in the massive, grand entrance hallway, wearing a highly simple, incredibly elegant, deep blue designer dress. But the absolute, terrifying silence was absolutely not because of her. It was entirely because of the exact 3 boys standing fiercely right beside her. They were absolutely all wearing the exact same, flawless, tailored navy blue suits, and they had their dark hair perfectly, immaculately styled. It was his exact hair, his exact piercing eyes, and his exact face, multiplied exactly by 3. "Oh my absolute God!" Valentina violently gasped directly at his side. The 3 identicalpun aggressively moved in absolute, perfect unison, fiercely taking a highly protective stand on either side of their beautiful mother, exactly like tiny, highly trained bodyguards. The absolute shortest one, or was he, had a thick, heavy book clutched fiercely against his chest. The middle one stood incredibly firm, his chin held arrogantly, powerfully high. The absolute largest one aggressively scanned the massive, crowded room, with eyes exactly as freezing and highly calculating as Javier's own. "Understood, Sarah," Javier managed to whisper, his voice barely a fragile, terrified breath. "Javier." She confidently, gracefully moved forward, and the 3 boys flawlessly moved exactly with her. "My absolute best, sincerest wishes for your massive marriage." Valentina's expensive crystal champagne flute violently slipped from her manicured hand and completely shattered against the imported marble floor. Absolutely no one even bothered to clean it up. "These are officially my beautiful sons," Sarah stated, with an incredibly quiet, terrifyingly calm voice. She took a massive, deep moment to proudly acknowledge them. "Miguel, Tomas, and Daniel." "Your sons?" The entire massive room violently spun. Javier aggressively grabbed a nearby, heavy wooden chair just to desperately help himself remain standing. Valentina violently recovered from her shock. "This is absolutely medically impossible, Javier. You desperately need to explicitly tell her that this is completely impossible." But Javier was completely, catastrophically wrong. And his brilliant mind was frantically, aggressively counting backward. Exactly 6 agonizing years. Sarah's deep hesitation in the doorway as she violently left. The constant, highly suspicious illness, she claimed, was just severe stress. "That is exactly how it initially started," Sarah said incredibly softly, exclusively for his ears. "I explicitly found out the exact day after I violently left. You were aggressively securing massive, multi-million-dollar funding for your Series A. You were incredibly, brutally clear that you absolutely could not handle any other massive distractions." Her voice slightly cracked. "We are officially your biological sons," Miguel stated firmly, stepping forward. "We are exactly 10 years old," the absolute tallest boy declared confidently. "We fiercely love aggressive coding and highly competitive sports. And massive, complex books," added the one clutching the heavy novel. "And we have intensely, exhaustively read absolutely everything about you," finished the third boy. Javier heavily collapsed onto the floor. 3 identical pairs of piercing eyes glared directly down at him. "This is absolute, pathetic ridiculousness," Valentina violently screamed. "My elite lawyers will absolutely demand federal DNA tests." "They are already completely, officially done," Sarah stated flawlessly, confidently pulling out a massive, thick legal folder. "They're official federal birth certificates, highly detailed pediatric health records, and ironclad federal DNA tests. I meticulously made certified copies of absolutely everything." The highly stressed wedding planner literally, violently fainted. Javier didn't even notice. He literally could not tear his terrified eyes away from his 3 identical sons, who were also staring at him incredibly, terrifyingly intensely. "We urgently need to formally talk," Sarah stated with a highly soft, commanding voice. Javier watched Valentina violently storm out of the massive room as the absolute last thing he clearly saw before absolutely everything went completely, terrifyingly dark. As he violently fell, his 3 identical sons instinctively, aggressively rushed forward to flawlessly catch him exactly as one single, highly coordinated unit, exactly as he ruthlessly taught his elite teams of software coders to flawlessly operate. The confrontation and the delayed wedding. "Drink this immediately," Sarah ordered, gently handing him a cold glass of water. They were securely sitting in a highly private elite VIP room, directly adjacent to the main ballroom that was exclusively reserved for them. Completely far away from the highly toxic, shocked stares and the thousands of glowing camera phones. The 3 boys remained in absolute, perfect, disciplined order as they sat highly rigidly on a massive leather sofa directly across from him. It was exactly like staring intensely at 3 perfect, living, breathing photographs of himself when he was a tiny child. "Exactly how incredibly long were you aggressively planning to permanently hide this from me?" he finally asked, his voice incredibly, pathetically low. "Forever," Sarah stated firmly, sitting highly protectively right next to her sons. "Until you maliciously, arrogantly, showed up with that toxic invitation specifically designed to violently hurt me. I desperately wanted it to deeply hurt you." "We completely know," Miguel stated coldly. "We intensely read all about exactly how incredibly well your massive business did. Mom explicitly says that you aggressively chose that corporate empire completely over a real family." Javier violently flinched. "You explicitly told them that?" "Only the absolute brutal truth," Sarah replied flawlessly. I fiercely decided absolutely not to violently complicate your perfect life because you were aggressively working on something you deemed highly important. The heavy door violently burst open. Valentina was standing there, her highly expensive, flawless makeup now slightly, pathetically smeared. The elite guests are aggressively leaving. This is an absolute catastrophic, highly public disaster. Vicky, please, Javier desperately began. Do absolutely not please me. You absolutely did not tell me you possessed 3 damn children. I absolutely didn't know, Javier whispered pathetically. Does she absolutely always act exactly like this? Tomas loudly asked his brothers, highly intentionally projecting his voice so absolutely everyone could perfectly hear. Daniel chuckled quietly to himself entirely behind his heavy book. Sarah desperately had to bite her lip to completely contain a massive smile. Valentina turned violently, bright red. I absolutely cannot do this. I desperately need massive time to think. She violently spun around on her designer heels and aggressively marched out. Dead, heavy silence fell once again. Javier stared intensely at his 3 sons. Miguel, the fierce protector. Tomas, the highly brave, outspoken one. Daniel, the highly observant, quiet genius. I will absolutely never, ever get those 6 agonizing years back, he finally stated, his voice completely broken. The massive wedding is in exactly 2 short weeks, the boys stated in perfect unison. We completely know. I desperately need to deeply think about this. Sarah gracefully stood up. Of course. Boys, formally say goodbye to your father. The heavy word violently hit him exactly like a physical blow. Miguel was the absolute first to aggressively step forward and highly formally extend his hand. An absolute pleasure to officially meet you, sir. Tomas casually waved without overthinking it. Your highly complex structural code for the massive primary tool of vision tech is absolutely brilliant. Daniel did absolutely nothing more than offer a highly respectful nod and fiercely grip his heavy book significantly tighter. Exactly what do you guys fiercely love the most? Javier desperately yelled at them as they were walking out. Absolutely everything. I desperately need to know absolutely everything. Sarah completely stopped in the heavy doorway. You should highly likely come over tomorrow, shouldn't you? We can absolutely all talk properly. Javier could only fiercely nod, entirely unable to physically speak. He sat completely alone in the massive VIP room and stared intensely at his own pathetic reflection in the dark window after the 3 boys had left. Because he was way too incredibly, arrogantly busy building his massive corporate empire to even realize exactly what he was violently losing. 3 absolutely perfect, highly intelligent boys had entirely grown up completely without him. His expensive smartphone violently buzzed. A text message from Vicky. The massive wedding is officially postponed. I urgently need space. For the absolute first time in his entire, highly calculated life, Javier Mendoza possessed absolutely zero, clear, massive plan for exactly what would happen next. He was significantly less terrified of that than the horrifying, massive idea of violently losing his incredible sons all over again. Reconnecting and the ultimate choice. They are finally deeply asleep, Sarah stated quietly as she gracefully joined Javier on the highly comfortable back porch of her modest house. It had been exactly 1 agonizing week since the massive, explosive gala dinner. They are absolutely, incredibly brilliant, Javier said, incredibly softly. He was still deeply, profoundly thinking about the highly chaotic, beautiful night he had just spent aggressively playing complex board games with his highly intelligent sons. Miguel plays chess significantly better than I do. He absolutely dominates everyone at chess. Tomas effortlessly, brilliantly hacked my highly secure smartphone. That is exactly what he loves to do. And Daniel? He absolutely hasn't put down that massive, complex book on advanced quantum physics that you generously gave him. Sarah smiled radiantly. They are absolutely, undeniably your biological sons. Javier looked directly, intensely at her. Why exactly didn't you fiercely tell me? The absolute, true, brutal reason. Sarah sat completely still and deeply watched the glowing fireflies in her tiny backyard for an incredibly long time. Do you vividly remember the exact week right before I violently left? You were aggressively finalizing the massive Series A funding round. I desperately, frantically, tried to explicitly let you know that I wasn't feeling well. Exactly 3 separate times. Absolutely all 3 times. You were aggressively locked in massive corporate meetings. Javier horrifyingly remembered it now. Her incredibly pale, sick face standing in the heavy doorway of his home office. He had aggressively, dismissively waved her away while aggressively negotiating with massive financial backers. You had that massive, highly critical presentation on the exact morning I officially found out I was heavily pregnant. Sarah's voice was completely, brutally firm. I quote you exactly. Absolutely nothing can violently distract me today. Vision Tech desperately needs to completely dominate this for the absolute future. I quietly watched you aggressively work on your massive speech that morning. You constantly, obsessively kept telling me that Vision Tech was your absolute baby. She slowly turned to look directly, fiercely into his eyes. I made a massive, life-altering decision. Your massive corporate baby, or our actual, biological ones. It absolutely wasn't fair. But it wasn't fair to them. And it absolutely wasn't fair to you. But I was incredibly sick, highly terrified, and completely, utterly exhausted from constantly watching my arrogant husband aggressively choose his elite investors completely over me. Every single damn day. Javier collapsed heavily back into his chair. I absolutely would have done something completely different. Would you really? Sarah asked, her voice piercing. Javier, be completely, brutally honest. Exactly what would you have actually done if I had explicitly told you in that highly critical moment? He deeply thought about himself when he was significantly younger. Intensely, aggressively focused on achieving massive success, violently willing to aggressively prove absolutely everyone completely wrong. I am honestly absolutely not sure. Exactly, Sarah stated. It would have violently cost you massive amounts of money. You would have aggressively set up massive trust funds, hired elite, expensive nannies, and highly planned exotic trips every once in a while, strictly between massive board meetings. Sarah's voice was slightly, agonizingly harsh. However, they desperately needed a highly present father, didn't they? Absolutely not a man exclusively in charge of an elite financial portfolio. Now, exactly what do they desperately need right now? Why the hell don't you aggressively ask them yourself? Sarah stood up. Besides, they are absolutely not asleep. They are highly likely actively eavesdropping right at the heavy door right this exact second. 3 highly distinct, loud thumps and the loud noise of frantic scuffling flawlessly proved exactly what she thought. Javier literally could not contain his massive, booming laughter. Without a single doubt, those are my fierce sons. Yes, they absolutely are. Sarah nodded with an incredibly soft voice. The massive, terrifying question is exactly whether you are fully, completely ready to finally be their true dad. Javier's expensive phone violently rang before he could even answer. The name Valentina brightly flashed on the glowing screen. Sarah clearly saw it. "You should highly likely take that. It completely sounds exactly like you urgently have to decide something massive." She quietly left him on the dark porch, where he intensely stared at his glowing phone, and deeply, profoundly, thought about his true, absolute legacy, both the massive corporate one he had aggressively built, and the beautiful human one he had almost violently, permanently lost. The redemption. "The massive global board meeting officially begins in exactly 10 minutes, sir," Javier's elite assistant nervously informed him over the phone. "Absolutely do not start it." "But sir, the highly critical quarterly financial forecasts, Tomas can effortlessly handle those." Javier confidently adjusted his rearview mirror and stared directly at the massive front doors of the local elementary school. "I am aggressively going to eat a massive lunch with my sons." He abruptly ended this call, just as three highly identical, energetic figures violently ran down the school stairs. When they vividly saw his massive Tesla, their identical faces brilliantly lit up. "I aggressively claim the front seat," Tomas yelled loudly. "Absolutely no way! I am exactly 4 minutes older," Miguel argued fiercely. By the absolute 4th minute of the massive argument, Daniel had completely, quietly slid into the luxurious back seat and was already deeply reading his heavy book. "Absolutely everyone gets a massive equal turn," Javier stated. He was still incredibly amazed at exactly how effortlessly natural this felt after only exactly 2 short weeks. Miguel today, Tomas tomorrow, and Daniel the exact day after that. Fair enough. They completely agreed in unison inside the highly chaotic burger joint that they had aggressively chosen. Javier rapidly fired massive questions at them while intensely watching them eat. "Did you genuinely, actually write your absolute first complex code when you were exactly 8 years old?" Tomas asked, French fries still heavily stuffed in his mouth. "Exactly 7, to be perfectly exact. It was an incredibly simple, highly basic game. Mom explicitly says that you two formally met at a massive tech conference," Miguel eagerly added. "She was proudly showing off a highly complex educational software project." Javier smiled warmly at the beautiful memory. "She completely, flawlessly destroyed my entire massive presentation." Daniel finally looked up from his heavy book. "Are you absolutely still getting married?" There was absolutely no clear, simple answer to the highly complex question. Javier slowly set his expensive food down. "Vicky and I are officially going to be completely separated for a while. Because of us." "Because of us?" Miguel asked incredibly softly. "No, absolutely not," Javier stated incredibly firmly. "Because I desperately need to fiercely decide exactly what is the absolute most important thing in my entire life. Mom explicitly says that is exactly what violently caused you two to separate in the absolute first place," Tomas stated bluntly. "Massive, entirely different goals." Javier deeply looked at their identical faces. So incredibly young, yet so terrifyingly, brilliantly intelligent at the exact same time. A massive portion of exactly what their mom had said was 100% brutally true. "Mom is absolutely flawlessly right again," Daniel murmured in an almost inaudible voice. Javier's expensive phone violently rang again. Yet another massive corporate problem at work. Yet another highly demanding board member who desperately wanted his absolute, undivided attention. The powerful man aggressively, violently, turned the phone completely off. "Do you guys desperately want massive amounts of ice cream?" Immediately, 3 identical hands aggressively shot high into the air. Javier profoundly felt something massive that he absolutely hadn't felt in agonizing years when he finally dropped them safely back off at school later that afternoon. Absolute, pure peace. There were absolutely zero highly volatile stock prices violently running through his brilliant mind. There were absolutely zero massive corporate buyouts that urgently required his aggressive attention. There were only exactly 3 beautiful boys happily waving goodbye. Their crisp uniform shirts were heavily stained with sticky ice cream. His elite assistant was highly likely violently freaking out. The massive board of directors was possibly a complete, utter disaster. Valentina had exactly 3 frantic messages waiting on his phone, but for the absolute first time in his entire, highly calculated life, Javier Mendoza knew with absolute, terrifying certainty exactly what was the absolute most important thing. Interactive question. Javier chose his sons over his billion-dollar company. What is the hardest choice you've ever had to make between work and family? Share below the ultimate legacy. As they happily walked back to the school building, they actively, fiercely argued over exactly who would highly likely get to ride in the front passenger seat tomorrow. Valentina angrily found Javier in his massive home office, where exactly 3 high-tech computer monitors clearly displayed the complex schedules for local youth soccer leagues. "I clearly see exactly what you have been aggressively up to," she stated coldly, violently picking up a massive youth baseball catalog. Javier calmly turned off the glowing screens, while our massive luxury wedding plans catastrophically failed. "Let's aggressively talk about your highly secret massive family, or exactly how you have completely missed absolutely all of your highly important meetings with the elite wedding planner to violently change the date." "Both massive topics, please," he stated, calmly pointing to an expensive chair. "Please, sit down." Valentina remained stubbornly standing there, her arms aggressively crossed. "I am incredibly sorry I took so incredibly long, Javier. I desperately wanted to generously give you massive time to deeply think about exactly what the hell is actively happening. But it has been exactly 3 agonizing weeks." "Valentina, they are absolutely not a situation. They are my biological sons, who officially met you today, and who were violently hidden completely from you." She glared at him. "Are you absolutely not violently angry about that?" Javier leaned heavily back and thought deeply first. "Yes, I absolutely was. But Sarah was 100% right about exactly who I truly was at that exact time. And exactly what the hell are you now?" Valentina's voice violently softened, because the exact Javier who had aggressively agreed to marry her was actively building a massive global tech giant, absolutely not happily going shopping for cheap youth baseball equipment. "I desperately wish I could miraculously be both." "Both?" She laughed incredibly loudly, highly toxically. "Just this exact week alone, you have aggressively canceled exactly 3 massive board meetings. The billion-dollar corporate deal with Microtech to completely buy out the company is being violently delayed. There are massive, highly toxic rumors actively spreading in the financial news. The massive business will remain completely open. We will absolutely be together." Javier looked directly, intensely into her eyes. "It strictly depends entirely on exactly what you want. You can clearly understand that my massive goals have completely, violently changed." "What exactly is different?" "They have violently gone in the absolute opposite direction." Vicky paced aggressively around the massive room. "You loudly claimed that your toxic past was significantly more important than absolutely anything else in Vision Tech. I was completely wrong. Were you?" He calmly gestured his hand around the massive luxury house. "We were strictly supposed to beautifully share this elite life. A massive life entirely built on brutal sacrifices and excessive, exhausting work." Javier confidently stood up. I am completely, permanently, finished missing their beautiful lives. Valentina completely stopped walking. They are your absolute choice. You have fiercely chosen to be their devoted father, completely over being my husband, over being the powerful man that I fiercely loved. I made a highly slight correction, Javier stated firmly, because that exact guy absolutely wasn't a good father, or highly likely, a genuinely good husband. Valentina heavily dropped her shoulders, aggressively took off her massive, multi-million-dollar diamond engagement ring, and violently slammed it down onto his desk. Javier, goodbye. She completely stopped in the heavy doorway. Just for the official record, those boys are incredibly lucky. This exact type of person you are right now might actually be an incredibly good father. Javier quietly opened the complex soccer plans again right after she left. There were active openings on exactly 3 completely different local teams. His beautiful sons would urgently need expensive shoes, cleats, and heavy knee pads. His phone violently buzzed. A text message from Sarah. The boys desperately want to know if you are absolutely still going to aggressively attend the massive science fair tomorrow. With a massive, highly genuine smile, Javier permanently cleared his entire elite calendar. Some massive decisions were miraculously made completely for you. I can absolutely tell you the brutal truth, Javier. Tom, his highly stressed chief financial officer, aggressively slid the massive quarterly financial report completely across the mahogany table. The absolute total value of our massive company has violently dropped exactly 15% since the highly toxic news about your personal situation widely spread. Javier rapidly scanned the massive file, incredibly highly aware of exactly how terrifyingly tense things were in the massive meeting. Exactly 8 elite business leaders were eagerly waiting for his absolute response. Their intense looks rapidly went from deeply worried to violently angry. Personal matter, Javier stated again, his voice pure steel. They are explicitly referring to my biological sons. The timing is incredibly, catastrophically bad with the massive microtech buyout, Patricia from the elite legal department stated firmly. My beautiful sons absolutely do not possess bad timing, Javier stated with a massively powerful voice. The absolute next point, Tom stated aggressively. There is absolutely no next point. That is the entire absolute point, Javier fired back. In exactly 2 short months, you have completely missed exactly 6 highly critical, massive global talks. The financial news is actively inventing highly toxic stories about massive instability and catastrophic mismanagement. The elite investors are completely terrified. Then aggressively let them feel terrified, Javier stated confidently, standing up. This massive meeting is officially over. We are absolutely not finished yet, Patricia yelled. Actually, we absolutely are. There is a highly critical meeting between the other parents and me at exactly 3 p.m. There were highly toxic, loud whispers throughout the massive boardroom. When Tom loudly called out to him, Javier was already almost out the heavy door. The massive board is actively, aggressively considering a highly formal vote of no confidence, Tom threatened loudly. Javier completely stopped moving. He slowly, terrifyingly turned around. Tom continued aggressively. You fiercely built this massive company, but it highly appears you are significantly more interested in aggressively building something entirely else these days. A fake family. A pathetic claim for cheap attention. Javier confidently marched directly back to the massive table and violently slammed both of his hands onto its polished surface. Listen to me incredibly carefully, so that absolutely all of you clearly know. The exact way advanced technology flawlessly works is incredibly important to me. But you will absolutely, utterly hate exactly what violently happens if you aggressively force me to choose between my massive work here and my 3 sons. That absolutely isn't a pathetic threat. It is an ironclad promise. Javier proudly stood up perfectly straight. I legally own the absolute vast majority of the massive voting shares. With exactly 1 single phone call, I can completely, violently dissolve this entire board. Patricia nervously, frantically shuffled her heavy papers. That would catastrophically damage the stock price. Then absolutely do not aggressively force me to choose. Javier checked his expensive watch. Now, please excuse me. I urgently need to go formally meet my son's brilliant math teacher. Javier let out a massive, incredibly slow sigh and aggressively loosened his tie in his luxury car. There had been exactly 3 missed calls on his phone, 2 from the frantic PR team and 1 from Sarah. They were all highly elite investors. He immediately called Sarah back. Exactly how was the massive meeting? She asked, exactly as expected. It went incredibly, flawlessly well. Exactly how are the boys? Absolutely ready to proudly show you their incredible grades? Daniel aggressively scored an A+. Javier smiled massively. He could physically feel the highly toxic stress of the boardroom violently melting away. Explicitly tell them I am aggressively on my way right now. He abruptly ended the call and started the massive, silent engine of the car. He clearly saw his own reflection in the rearview mirror. The powerful man staring intensely back at him was absolutely not the exact same man who, just 2 short months ago, had arrogantly asked his ex-wife to pathetically attend his luxury wedding. That arrogant man would have violently chosen the massive business. This brand new person didn't even urgently need to think about it. Dad, pay close attention. Tomas was aggressively skateboarding on a highly thin, dangerous board. Be incredibly careful. Tomas violently wobbled as Javier aggressively lunged toward him, but Miguel was already right there to fiercely support his brother. He absolutely never listens. Miguel sighed heavily, sounding exactly, flawlessly like Sarah. They were happily hanging out in Javier's massive garden, which now featured brand new, highly expensive sports equipment, a massive treehouse that was still actively under construction, and exactly 3 identical luxury bicycles. Daniel sat peacefully on the grass with his legs crossed, deeply reading a thick book while quietly watching his brothers. Dad, Daniel called out, could you thoroughly explain exactly what quantum entanglement is? Right after you explicitly tell me exactly why my complex code absolutely isn't working. Tomas violently interrupted him, completely dropping his skateboard. He will aggressively help me with my massive science project right after that, Miguel responded firmly. Javier was incredibly, massively stressed out, but in an absolutely profoundly good way. Tomas, show me the exact code, 1 massive step at a time. The 4 of them sat closely together, huddled aggressively around Tomas's high-tech laptop. Javier expertly pointed out the exact missing semicolon and brilliantly explained the massive error in the complex reasoning. When the program flawlessly executed, Tomas's face completely lit up with pure, unadulterated joy. And exactly what about quantum entanglement? Daniel asked with massive hope. Miguel aggressively demanded that the science project come absolutely first. Tomorrow is the absolute final deadline. Tomorrow? Javier made a massive, exaggerated grimace. Why on earth didn't you guys explicitly mention it significantly earlier? Miguel slowly looked down. Exactly how did you seamlessly maintain that massive meeting with the elite investors? Hey, Javier dropped directly to one knee to look his beautiful son directly in the eyes. It is infinitely more important than absolutely anything else to aggressively help you guys. Do you completely understand that? The three boys nodded fiercely, but Javier clearly saw that they absolutely all looked at each other with deep, lingering doubt. He had tragically been forced to miss exactly 2 highly important visits over the weekend due to massive, unavoidable work problems. They were actively keeping score, exactly as he used to do when his own father was constantly absent. "There is a massive, brand new rule," Javier stated firmly. "Absolutely no more hiding from my corporate plans. You explicitly, aggressively tell me if you desperately need me." "Agreed. Agreed." Tomas aggressively high-fived him. "Even at exactly 3 a.m.? Daniel asked incredibly seriously. "Even at exactly 3 a.m., Javier promised fiercely. "Your mom explicitly says that you used to aggressively work until 3 a.m., Miguel stated. "Mom is absolutely flawlessly right again." Javier smiled warmly. However, massive things change. Powerful people completely change. His expensive phone violently rang. Yet another arrogant board member desperately demanding his attention. Javier aggressively turned it completely off without even bothering to look. "And quantum entanglement." He looked directly at Daniel. "Think about it exactly like 3 completely identical boys. Aside from Miguel's massive volcano project, they aggressively did complex math, advanced coding, and other incredible things the entire afternoon." Javier's expensive hair was heavily glued with craft paste. His $500 dress shirt was violently stained with green grass, and he learned to deeply, profoundly value Sarah's incredible kindness even more. The massive explosion flawlessly worked. The massive explosion flawlessly worked, Miguel stated with pure pride. "In the absolute end," Tomas added. Daniel made it incredibly clear that Sarah raised a highly skeptical eyebrow at Javier's completely ruined shirt after the 3rd massive explosion. "It was absolutely 100% worth it," he stated fiercely in his head. She smiled radiantly, and Javier vividly saw a massive, beautiful flash of exactly the way she used to lovingly look at him long before Vision Tech, long before she was so incredibly focused on massive success, and long before she felt deeply, agonizingly disappointed, and literally couldn't understand him. The tragic twist and the final code. "Mr. Mendoza, you absolutely must aggressively review these massive legal documents immediately." Javier's elite lawyer aggressively spread thick papers entirely over his massive desk at home. Javier rapidly, meticulously read the very first page. Irrevocable trust funds for his sons. "Standard corporate practice when someone possesses massive amounts of wealth," the elite lawyer stated, adjusting his glasses. "We have flawlessly drafted completely different, highly specific trusts for every single boy that can be securely accessed at age 25. 21. Given the staggering amount, sir, these boys are incredibly responsible." Javier thought deeply about exactly how brilliantly Miguel planned, about exactly how highly creative Tomas was, and about exactly how profoundly wise Daniel was in his own quiet way. "I completely, fiercely believe in them. Incredible job. There were significantly more studies. Now let's aggressively divide the massive company shares equally among them." The elite lawyer paused heavily. "That is almost exactly 40% of the entire Vision Tech empire, Mr. Mendoza. How incredibly great that they are actively starting to aggressively code early." Javier absolutely did not hesitate for a single microsecond to violently sign the heavy papers. A voice from the heavy door loudly cleared its throat. Valentina was standing there, looking simultaneously incredibly elegant and violently angry. That is absolutely right. You are aggressively leaving a massive gift, Vicky. I came to forcefully return some expensive things to you. She aggressively slammed a small velvet box directly onto his desk. I explicitly heard you were aggressively changing the entire way the massive company works. Now, I completely understand. The elite lawyer meticulously gathered his heavy papers. I will aggressively take care of this immediately. Vicky violently snatched one of the trust documents the absolute second they were alone. Massive amounts of money. Just exactly like that. They are my biological sons. They absolutely do not have any relation to you, but they share my exact DNA. The heavy paper was violently thrown down. You absolutely must know that the massive board frantically called me. They are completely terrified that you are going to have a massive nervous breakdown. Javier laughed out loud. Because I am actively being a father? Because you are aggressively dismantling absolutely everything you built? Valentina's highly calculated calm completely, violently broke. The ambitious Javier I knew would absolutely never have done that. The arrogant Javier you knew was completely, utterly empty, he stated, confidently standing up. The pathetic Javier you knew aggressively judged his absolute worth entirely by volatile stock prices and massive agreements to buy other companies. Now, I fiercely use advanced science projects and youth sports matches to proudly prove it. Valentina glared intensely at him for a very, incredibly long time. You have completely changed for the better. I genuinely, truly hope it is for the absolute best. She aggressively grabbed her box of expensive things from the closet and slowly turned around in the doorway. Those incredible boys had better be absolutely worth it. Javier thought deeply about exactly how fiercely Miguel desperately wanted to protect him. The brave, wild imagination of Tomas. The incredibly interested, brilliant mind of Daniel. He would absolutely never get back the agonizing years he had completely missed, and he absolutely, fiercely refused to violently lose the precious times in the future. He simply stated, they are absolutely worth it. They are genuinely, truly valuable. Javier called Sarah immediately after she left. Are the boys absolutely still awake, desperately trying to illegally hack into the school's massive grading method? Explicitly tell Tomas that that is absolutely not okay. Sarah laughed warmly. Fiercely tell him yourself. You are absolutely still coming over for a massive dinner, right? Javier meticulously checked his massive desk. Elite trust papers and highly confidential company documents covered it completely. Massive options about endless money, absolute power, and leaving a towering legacy. It absolutely didn't matter at all. I absolutely wouldn't miss it for the world. Daniel, your dad is officially here, Sarah stated brightly, aggressively ringing the doorbell. The warm house smelled incredibly of homemade lasagna, Javier's absolute brand new favorite meal ever since he shockingly discovered that his sons had completely inherited his massive hunger. He found himself happily coming here significantly more in the late afternoons, magnetically drawn to the highly organized, beautiful chaos of aggressive homework, loud computer games, and exactly 3 completely different, brilliant personalities who truly knew him and happily included him in their world. Tomas sprinted violently down the stairs first. Dad, I successfully made the complex app flawlessly work again after that massive bug. The one about the highly complex schedule? Javier asked. No, the massive one that kept aggressively hitting things when Tomas abruptly stopped and looked terrifiedly at Sarah's face. The highly hypothetical app that we are absolutely not making just for fun. Sarah gently shook her head and desperately tried not to smile. At least he is incredibly honest about actively breaking the strict rules. Miguel then proudly appeared with a heavy clipboard in his hand. Aggressively sign this, Dad. It has to deeply do with the massive robot race, the huge one exactly a month from now. Javier frantically searched for a pen. Next week, Miguel corrected him sternly. I explicitly told you exactly 3 times. Javier completely stopped moving. A massive, highly critical board meeting went completely silent in the room. Daniel, who had quietly joined them, looked intensely at his brothers. It is absolutely fine, Miguel stated quickly. Mom can easily. Absolutely no way. Javier aggressively pulled out his phone and rapidly sent a quick, highly demanding text message. They can aggressively change the exact time of the massive meeting, but it absolutely isn't important, he stated. Absolutely not as incredibly important as this. In a highly elegant manner, Javier signed the official paper. Exactly what time should I aggressively arrive? Miguel's face completely lit up. Exactly 9 a.m. We are currently aggressively competing in the 2nd round. Javier quietly watched Sarah and the 3 boys play together incredibly effortlessly while they happily ate dinner. The beautiful inside jokes, the secret messages that were kept highly silent, the agonizing years they had spent completely together that he had entirely missed. I actively noticed you were incredibly quiet, Sarah said softly, while helping him with the dishes later. Massive time to deeply think about it. A highly dangerous topic. I completely missed a massive amount, he stated softly. Their absolute first words. Their very first steps. You are officially here right now because of your highly rude, aggressive acceptance of the invitation. Sarah laughed warmly. It absolutely wasn't my finest moment. No, it was incredibly brilliant, Javier stated, drying his hands. You were highly, incredibly aware of exactly what you were doing. You were absolutely certain that I desperately had to physically see them, to profoundly realize exactly what I had violently missed. The brothers could be loudly heard aggressively arguing over exactly how to dominate a complex video game in the living room. Javier stated with an incredibly soft voice, I completely, profoundly understand now. Sarah gently touched his arm. You absolutely do. I truly know it, echoed. Dad, come aggressively solve echoed. Dad, come aggressively solve this. Tomas is actively lying again. Javier and Sarah deeply looked at each other, completely knowing. Fierce duty calls, she said. Javier confidently headed directly toward the beautiful, chaotic mess of his sons. He was aggressively moving directly toward the exact, perfect life he absolutely should have fiercely chosen agonizing years ago. It is infinitely better late than never. Javier sat frozen in his elite doctor's pristine office and stared blankly at the horrifying results of his highly advanced MRI. It seemed exactly as if the terrifying words were violently floating completely off the page. Malignant. Inoperable. 6 months. Absolutely no viable treatment options. Mr. Mendoza, Dr. Roberts leaned heavily forward. Do you want me to aggressively review the highly experimental options again? No, absolutely not at all, Javier stated, taking his time to meticulously, slowly fold the heavy papers. I completely understand. He was completely confused and highly disoriented as he slowly walked back to his car. He had arrogantly thought the massive headaches were simply caused by extreme corporate worry exactly 3 months ago. Severe dizziness from working way too incredibly hard. His expensive phone violently rang. A text message from Miguel. Go ahead and violently beat Tomas at chess. Exactly when are you coming over? Javier completely stopped because he suddenly, physically, couldn't drive. Exactly how on earth do you tell three beautiful, brilliant 10-year-old boys that their brand new, beloved dad is permanently leaving? He frantically called Sarah. "Javier, you absolutely should be at... I urgently need to physically see you completely alone, absolutely without the boys." His highly terrifying voice must have massively warned her in some profound way. "I will explicitly meet you at the quiet coffee shop right near work." Exactly 20 agonizing minutes later, Sarah clearly saw the horrifying expression on his pale face and aggressively got them both incredibly strong drinks. "Seriously, what is it?" It was an incredibly quiet, terrified question. He slowly slid the heavy medical papers completely across the table, intensely watching her read them. He clearly saw her soft hands violently begin to tremble. 6 months, her voice violently cracked. "If I am incredibly lucky, the highly experimental, painful treatments might buy me a few agonizing months more. They absolutely are not going to magically cure me." Sarah violently put her hands completely over her eyes. "Oh my God, the boys." Javier's voice sounded completely hollow. "I finally, miraculously learned exactly how to be their true father. So please, absolutely do not do that right now." Sarah fiercely grabbed his hand. "Do absolutely not give up." "I am absolutely not giving up. I am being completely, brutally honest." He aggressively pulled significantly more heavy papers completely out of his designer bag. "Absolutely everything is perfectly correct now. The massive trust funds, the elite company shares, the corporate oversight. Take it all. You urgently need to fiercely take care of them. They desperately need their dad. They possess their fierce, incredible mom," Javier stated, giving her hand a massive, tight squeeze. "You are absolutely enough. You are enough all the damn time." Sarah aggressively began to violently cry completely in private. "Exactly how are we going to violently tell them all at once?" Javier stated with pure force. "Exactly how we absolutely should have done everything completely from the very beginning." His phone violently rang again. Tomas. This time Daniel arrogantly says that triple telepathy is absolutely not the exact same thing as quantum interaction. "You explicitly promised you would aggressively explain it." Javier stared intensely at the glowing message for a very long time. He was having a massive, agonizingly hard time with time itself. Way too incredibly much was violently lost. There absolutely wasn't enough left. "Choose tonight. Tonight is the exact night we violently tell them," he stated to Sarah. Sarah aggressively wiped her eyes and nodded fiercely. "We absolutely didn't think they were so incredibly strong." "They are innocent kids," Javier stated, offering a highly weak, pathetic smile. "They absolutely are, of course." They remained completely, utterly still for a little while longer. Two devastated parents having a highly agonizing time talking to each other. Three brilliant boys who absolutely, fiercely deserved significantly more time with their dad than cruel life was tragically giving them. It violently brought them together. Javier deeply thought about the massive, incredible moments he desperately wished he had actually been there for, and the beautiful ones he would absolutely never get to see. The massive graduations, the terrifying first dates, elite college. But he absolutely did have now. He possessed today. It aggressively had to be enough. The final code. Javier sat heavily at his massive desk. He stared intensely at exactly 3 identical, expensive, leather-bound notebooks completely spread out directly in front of him. His hands were violently trembling from the heavy medication. However, he aggressively had to force himself to flawlessly write, with absolute perfect clarity. "Dear Miguel," he began with the absolute first book. "You are the fierce, unbreakable guardian. That powerful person who meticulously makes absolutely sure that your brothers aggressively do their homework and eat their vegetables. Exactly like when I vividly saw you fiercely catch Tomas right after he violently fell off that highly dangerous skateboard. He stopped completely because he felt incredibly dizzy. The elite doctors explicitly told him he had exactly 4 agonizing months left. He was going to aggressively utilize every single precious minute. In the second book, Tomas, your brilliant mind flawlessly works in the exact same way that mine does. Absolutely always, moving incredibly quickly and fiercely, seeing highly complex links that other people completely fail to see. However, you possess something incredibly massive that I absolutely never had. The fierce, unbreakable guts to actively put other people significantly ahead of your own massive goals. It was significantly harder in the third. Daniel, I absolutely love exactly how intensely interested you are in the massive world. It deeply makes me think of your beautiful mother. The exact way you aggressively question absolutely everything. You desperately try to profoundly understand significantly more than exactly what is merely on the surface. Different, highly specific memories were beautifully written into every single one of them. Miguel had tragically learned way too late exactly how to be a highly effective, good boss. For Tomas, the absolute true stories of his massive victories and devastating losses. Daniel spent exactly as much time as physically possible with the complex scientific ideas that had fiercely guided his entire life when he absolutely wasn't writing, teaching Miguel exactly how to flawlessly play chess, aggressively fixing massive bugs in the complex code with Tomas. Daniel and I deeply talking about advanced physics. Sarah quietly stood aside and aggressively took high-resolution photos of absolutely everything on her phone. She softly, tearfully said, "For later." The brilliant boys profoundly knew that he absolutely wasn't well. They actively took it significantly better than he arrogantly thought they would. Aggressively using absolutely all of their combined, massive intelligence to frantically research, heavily advising on highly experimental treatments, violently getting into a massive fight with the elite doctors. "We absolutely do not surrender," Miguel fiercely stated every single day. "There is absolutely always a highly complex way out," Tomas aggressively argued. "The massive statistics absolutely aren't always 100% correct," Daniel stated. Javier aggressively wrote late at night, when the agonizing pain violently kept him awake. "Do you vividly remember exactly when we violently built that massive volcano? Your absolute first competitive robot battle, when you aggressively tried to illegally hack into my secure phone. Every single incredible experience is massively important. Every single moment beautifully written in permanent ink. In addition to the dense text, he meticulously drew highly complex sketches. Simple, brilliant coding routines were flawlessly coded. He accurately drew complex maps to successfully find the highly secret knowledge that he had tragically found way too incredibly late. He fiercely wrote in every single book that the absolute most massive, important thing to deeply remember was that true, absolute success is absolutely never measured by massive money or elite achievements. Beautiful moments exactly like these flawlessly show exactly how incredibly much it truly means. The heavy books aggressively became thicker with the massive papers. His hands became significantly less strong, but the heavy, powerful words absolutely did not stop. For his beautiful sons, just in case they desperately needed it. For absolutely all the profound talks they tragically couldn't have. "Are you absolutely ready?" Sarah softly asked, as she gently, lovingly helped Javier flawlessly fix his silk tie. He saved his massive energy by simply nodding. It had been exactly 3 agonizing months since he had fiercely given his word. Miguel fiercely competed in his highly anticipated second massive robotics event today. His elite group had successfully reached the grand finals. Sarah continued softly. The boys are already aggressively there. Miguel is incredibly terrified. He absolutely shouldn't be. Javier miraculously managed to smile. He is incredibly, terrifyingly smart. There was massive, explosive energy in the huge school gym. Javier instantly, vividly saw his sons. 3 identical blonde heads, heavily hunched over a highly complex robot, frantically making massive, last-minute changes. "Dad!" They violently ran over and gave him a massive, fierce, bone-crushing hug. Ever since his absolute last agonizing stay in the hospital, they were incredibly, highly careful around him. "Exactly how is our massive champion doing?" Javier asked Miguel. Before Miguel could even respond, Tomas aggressively stated, "The massive servo motor is completely failing." "The complex math is 100% correct," Daniel added firmly. Javier intensely looked at their robot. "Explicitly show me." They aggressively did a massive job, completely together, exactly like the incredible old times. 4 heads heavily hunched over complex code and intricate circuits. Javier's hands were way too violently shaky to physically help, but he could absolutely still think with crystal clarity. "Right there," he pointed accurately. "The massive link absolutely isn't strong." Tomas aggressively fixed it incredibly quickly. It loudly buzzed to life, and the massive speaker violently yelled that there were exactly 2 minutes remaining. "Mom!" Miguel looked incredibly upset. "Dad, can you absolutely stay until the very end?" Sarah shot Javier a highly rapid, deeply concerned look. They both profoundly knew he desperately needed to rest. "Not even wild feral horses could ever drag me away," Javier stated fiercely. There was massive, brutal competition. Miguel's elite team aggressively kept advancing in every single round. Javier proudly watched his son fiercely lead with absolute confidence, flawlessly deal with massive setbacks with pure grace, and remain incredibly humble when he violently won. In the absolute final, brutal round, their highly complex robot did a massive, incredible job. Javier violently clapped the absolute loudest when Miguel's elite team was formally named the absolute winners, even though he absolutely wasn't feeling very well. "We did it!" Miguel violently ran toward his parents with the massive prize fiercely in his hand. "Dad, we actually did it!" "You did it," Javier made a highly slight, profound correction. "Absolutely everyone later." Javier went back home to proudly watch his incredible sons have a massive party. Sarah looked deeply into his eyes and profoundly understood exactly what he was silently saying. "Absolutely 0 regrets," he stated incredibly softly. "Just exactly 1. He proudly watched the boys happily playing together, completely without possessing enough massive time. "They possess absolutely everything they desperately need from you." Javier thought deeply about the massive notebooks that were absolutely still waiting at home. Those heavy pages were completely filled with profound lessons, beautiful memories, and pure, absolute love. "Almost everything," he stated incredibly softly. But Javier profoundly knew that Sarah was 100% right after proudly watching exactly how his sons fiercely led, exactly how highly creative they were, and exactly how terrifyingly smart Daniel truly was. Absolutely everything would be completely, perfectly fine. They were his absolute, ultimate gift. His most massively important success. His flawless, ideal code. Sarah sat peacefully in the beautiful garden she intimately knew and proudly watched exactly 3 incredible 15-year-old boys working flawlessly together on highly advanced computers. The massive treehouse that Javier had aggressively started building an incredibly long time ago was fully, beautifully finished. And now it was exactly where they fiercely coded. "Mom," Tomas called out loudly, "we successfully found exactly one more." She climbed up incredibly carefully and crouched down entirely under the heavy door that proudly said, "Mendoza Brothers Tech Lab." Inside, she clearly saw 3 identical, massive smiles. "Look incredibly closely at that screen," Miguel stated proudly. "They are aggressively hidden entirely in Dad's highly complex old code." It was yet another massive, brilliant Easter egg. Right before he tragically died, Javier had meticulously, aggressively, hidden dozens of them completely within the massive code of Vision Tech. He lovingly left his beautiful sons tiny, brilliant clues, highly complex puzzles, and profound life lessons for them to eagerly find. Always fiercely remember that massive success, completely without a loving family, is absolutely nothing more than pathetic numbers on a glowing screen, Daniel read loudly. Sarah gently touched the heavy old book that was securely on her lap. Javier possessed exactly one of the 3 he had left. The brilliant boys absolutely still read them incredibly often. And as they aggressively grew older, they constantly found massive, brand new, profound meanings perfectly hidden in them. "He would be so incredibly, unbelievably proud of all of you," she stated, with an incredibly soft, loving voice. "He absolutely would be too," Miguel stated firmly. He was now officially the proud president of his senior class, and had already been aggressively accepted into elite Ivy League colleges. In advanced coding, Tomas had literally just won his absolute 3rd massive national title. CERN was highly interested in Daniel's massive, groundbreaking study on quantum physics. But what was infinitely, massively more important was that they were genuinely good, incredible people. Highly kind, fiercely helpful, and completely, unbreakably united. Tomas slowly looked up from his expensive laptop and said, "Hey, Mom, do you vividly remember the absolute first time Dad unexpectedly came over?" "With that highly toxic wedding invitation," Sarah laughed warmly. "Explicitly to make me feel incredibly bad. The absolute worst, pathetic thing he ever maliciously did, completely in the end. Do you honestly think he profoundly knew exactly how much he completely, violently changed our entire lives?" Daniel asked softly. Sarah thought deeply about Javier's highly agonizing final days, and exactly how he had aggressively insisted on fiercely going to absolutely all of their school events, meticulously writing absolutely everything down, and fiercely doing this until he literally couldn't even hold a pen. She smiled. "He explicitly told me that you guys had completely, miraculously changed his entire life too. Exactly as always, the brilliant boys aggressively went directly back to their complex code, with their 3 identical heads heavily hunched closely together. Javier had patiently, lovingly taught them exactly how to play soccer in the massive garden, and they had violently built that massive volcano that explosively erupted right in the patio. This was also exactly where he had fiercely, lovingly hugged them for the absolute last time to peacefully say goodbye. Even though they were only completely together for an incredibly, tragically short amount of time, it was absolutely, flawlessly perfect. Exactly, perfectly as he had brilliantly programmed it to be. What an incredibly emotional, powerful ending. What did you guys fiercely think of the exact way Javier brilliantly redeemed himself? Did you genuinely believe his massive change was completely sincere? Tell us exactly what you would have done in Sarah or Javier's place in the comments. If you absolutely loved this beautiful story, please share it so significantly more people can deeply enjoy it. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you in the next amazing video.